Caller, you're on the air.
First time caller, long time listener. Hey.
Soon to be banned. Canceled.
All right.
Y'all want to jump into this thing?
Okay. We're going to start it off.
Let's jump.
Open her up.
All right. Well, we're back here at the IOTV studio for another podcast. Today, we've got myself, Tim Anello. To my left is Calahan Henry. To his left is Shane Atwell. And to my right is the man, the myth, the legend, Tommy Vaughn.
The GOAT.
I expected the cut-off sleeves and the baseball jersey, but
I outgrew it.
did you? When you were
Still a grown boy.
That's right.
so, we've all met, obviously, bowfishing episode, but Tommy and I met back in, I think it was 2016. You were guiding.
Yep, and we met through a mutual friend.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that, Paul.
Yep, Paul called and said, hey, I got a buddy that's interested in shooting a bowfishing episode, and all these years later, we're still friends.
Imagine that.
They wrote a country song about that. What was I thinking?
Well, you guys have been out on the boat with him now, too, so
Yeah.
you feel my pain.
Yeah.
Exactly. The yacht.
Yeah,
The
that's
yacht.
right.
You
Yeah,
know,
the fishing
26 foot being, we were in the 24 footer, to be honest, but the 26 footers actually, did you sell the 24 footer?
No, I still got it.
Okay.
No, the 26 is up for sale.
Okay, it was the
I'm gonna
26.
upgrade to a new one.
You're selling your yacht.
The yacht, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Upgrading with a newer yacht.
That's definitely the biggest bow fishing boat I've ever been on.
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
I mean, I think short of some of those pontoon boats that those guys fish on, that it's probably one of the biggest, longest boats
Yeah.
on the water.
Yeah, and that's a Sea Arc 24 footer, and it's actually made for the catfishing world. And I just customized it to be able to guide out of it and bowfish. But you remember when we were down there at the Muzzy when we hit that storm? It was a good thing we were in that boat.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're getting a little bit ahead here, telling stories before we really get to know.
Yeah, don't
Who-
spill the beans yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not they don't know who you are yet, other than Tommy.
Well, you invited me here, and you know I talk a lot, so I'll shut up. You can go ahead and go.
Well,
It's
so,
your show.
No weight guide service.
You want me to talk now?
This is how this is going to go.
Yeah.
So, guys, this is Tommy. He has no weight guide service
Hey, Tom.
on Grand Lake here in Northeast Oklahoma.
Still does.
Yeah.
And you started in 2016? Or was it way before that? That's just when y'all
I've
met.
been guiding 9 years. I come out with No Wake 2018.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. What made you want to go into doing that?
It was a weird deal. I grew up fishing my whole life and hunting, and I had a work accident, and I always wanted to retire on Grand Lake. And after my injury, I just got out on the water and started fishing and turned it into a successful business and meeting a lot of new people and made a lot of great friendships out of it, and it's a lot of fun. So,
Heck yeah.
You didn't grow up around Grand, though, did you?
I was only an hour and a half from there, so I was there on the weekends.
Okay.
Yep.
I couldn't remember if that was home.
Nope, it wasn't home, but it is now.
So,
You were telling us a little bit while we were fishing, though, how you came up with the name or why you came up with the name.
So most of the guide services have their names on there, and I'm like, well, I want to make a brand. So I come up with No Wake Guide Service because you get free advertisement all over the lake.
everywhere on the lake.
There's no wake buoys. There's people hollering at you off
Just
their
everywhere.
dock, no wake. And then
Well, we passed one that actually had a banner up that said "No Wake,"
Yeah,
free
on the boat
advertisement.
dock.
and it was orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing about it was I come up with the slogan to go with it: slow down, relax, and fish more. Because that's what no wake means, is slow down. So slow down, relax, and fish more. But the secret behind that is it's orange and black, right? The boat's orange and black. Everything's orange and black. And they're like, oh, you must be an OSU fan.
Well, yeah.
No, I was supposed to play football for OU. But I was watching Bedlam. The orange and black and chrome really popped. In my head, I'm thinking marketing, no wake, slow goes. So that's how we come up with the No Wake Guide Service.
Right on.
Nice.
So
You saying the pokes are slow?
Slow poke.
Oh,
I think that's
true.
I think that's cool.
got me.
Zinga!
Walked right into that one like a closed door. So, when you started the guide service, I'd been bow fishing with you before that, but was that really your main gig as far as a guide service? When you started it, bow fishing wasn't your number one, not product, but yeah, that wasn't the number one thing you were taking clients out on, right?
no, it was mainly paddlefish. That was a popular deal because we got the largest population anywhere in the world, and that was kind of seasonal. So I started bow fishing and really took off to it, and it's something that would entertain those summer months when we weren't catching paddlefish, and it got addictive. And I was able to learn myself, and then Pete Gregory, who's the president of the BAA, now is a good friend of ours. We've shot tournaments together, invited me to Springfield for the bow fishing championship. I believe that was 17, and that was the first tournament I shot. And I was like, this is complete fun. Staying up all night, getting a couple hours sleep, staying up the next night for a week straight, fixing everything. You know, it's like, who would call this fun? Well, you got to be half crazy. Once that got in our blood, it was like, and then we've shot so many tournaments together. It's kind of, I don't know, it's something that when it clicks and you like it, it's addictive.
It is. I mean, so, well, we'll get there a little bit. And so you mentioned paddlefish, spoonbill, what we call them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because until the year I came out and fished with you, I didn't realize that Grand had the largest population in, is it the world or just North America? I don't know where all the paddlefish.
The Oklahoma biologist said it's the largest in the world. Now you talk to some of them in Missouri and stuff, and they say they have it, but we don't have a season on them, so we can catch them all year long. Most of your other states have like a 30, 90, 60 day, or you can only harvest one. We use barbless hooks, can catch and release. So we got a lot more flexibility with our fish because our population is so good. And the thing that makes us different from a lot of places is we don't have any locks and dams. So these fish filter feeders on plankton because they're cousins to a sturgeon. So they have to have high water current to make a long run to spawn. And that's what separates us with the long river channels.
Well, it's like me. I live on Eufaula Lake, and there's some in the lake, but the majority of them are below the dam. Like if we ever were to get into them and snag them or anything, it'd be below the dam. And it's just, I think either somebody put them there or just how God does it, they got in there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're starting to see a bigger population inside the lake now. Yeah. So I know Fort Gibson's got spoonbill also. I've been running jet ski through there and had one jump by me as a little kid, and I was like, what the heck was that?
I think just about every lake in Oklahoma's got them to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think the two biggest populations, though, are for some reason Keystone and Grand Lake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Keystone's got some monsters in it.
Yeah.
Big fish.
Yeah,
Jeremiah's,
that's right. That's where
he's got the world record out of there. State record, world record, and everything come out of Keystone.
Yeah.
he's kind of dialed in specifically just for
Now, was that
hunting those big.
was that below the dam though?
No,
No,
it's out in
it's
the
on
lake.
the lake.
Oh,
That's
okay.
on the lake. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's a
Gotcha.
big. I mean, you got people traveling from all over the U.S. to world. You've had the one chick, the influencer, didn't she come from
Japan.
Japan to
What?
spoonbill fish, right?
Yep, she flew all the way over here by herself from Japan. We fished one day. She caught
That's pretty
16
wild.
fish and flew back to Japan.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yep.
But you chase everything but bass, basically, guiding wise.
Yeah, we-
Sand bass, crappie.
Sand bass, crappie, catfish, bow fishing, and paddlefish. So it's kind of nice because we can fill in. If one species isn't going, we can kind of fill it in with another. I just don't bass fish because there's really not a market for the guides, and trying to keep track of everything else to be consistent and make good trips for the customers, it's just not.
Yeah.
It's not feasible.
I mean, now, we don't have a lot of like the northern fish, but I would say that bass, they've got to be one of the hardest fish because their pattern is constantly. I mean, you're big bass fisherman, so Shane, with it, their pattern constantly changes. So to try to keep track of all that, as opposed to a spoonbill, they'll school up, they'll split up, and then they'll either be shallower or deeper. But for the most part, that's about it, right? You find them, and then you start trolling for them, catching them.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing with bass in the, down south, at least in our, what we call our home lakes, we just don't have massive schools like, you run into crappie or sand bass or even paddlefish. When they school up and you find them in one area and you can really hammer on them. And the bass, you might find wolf packs here and there. And yeah, there's the occasional
staging area.
Big school of bass, coming off in June when you're getting into the post spawn, stuff like that. But for the most part, we just don't, our lakes aren't schooling lakes.
Well, anybody that's going to get in bass fishing too they get crazy about it and they get their own gear, their own boat, and then they're professionals before too long. And then that's how bass fishing runs around these parts.
Well, you got to be the CEO of a credit card company or something to afford freaking bass boats nowadays.
Well, yeah, and it's like,
but it's not just bass. I mean, spoonbill,
crappie,
crappie.
spoonbill.
I mean, you guys are using.
Oh, the rigs he's using a spoonbill.
Yeah, you're using a down scan and.
Well, and that's like a lot of people. They figured out it's cheaper to hire a guide than it is to go buy $20,000 worth of electronics. And I know you don't need that much electronics, but you have to have good electronics. You have to have good mapping. You got to know what you're doing. And then you go into buying tackle, rods, reels, divers, even line.
Well, you got to consistently put people on it too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just go out there and be like, oh yeah, we got 3 days to do this. We'll find them at some point. You're doing day by day.
Yeah.
So to have that, technology probably changed your world a little bit.
Yeah. And then you got everybody's throwing in the live scope on it now. And that's a whole different show we could get into. But my deal is that doesn't have a bite button. It's helped people find fish.
Yep.
But it doesn't have a bite button.
Doesn't make them hungry.
And then I've even been playing with it for live scoping on the paddlefish. It's not as easy as it looks, let me tell you. Now, the younger generation, because I know we all got a little gray except for one, they can pick it up quick.
But it's video gaming.
Yeah. It took me a while.
Oh, I remember trying to do it, and it was insane. Because the way it turns, and you're like, oh, it's, I guess, that old brain mentality. The screen's in front of me. So no matter which way that thing's pointing, I think the fish is in front of me. So he's like, all right, there it is. So I cast over. He's like, hey, it's over to the right. That's which way it's pointing. I was like, no, it's right. He's like, no.
I'm looking here.
5 minutes later, all right, there it is. Cast off the front. He's like, man, come on. It's over here. I was
You're
like,
not coming anymore.
Tim, get your line out of the prop. You just went through $50 worth of braid. Now we got to respool.
Yeah. It was not as easy as it looked. And then, so we don't have seasons as far as catching, fishing for them, but when is really the best time, the hot time to go, or I guess the cold time for spoonbill fishing? It's wintertime, right?
Yeah, what I describe it to people as trophy fishing when I've caught my 100+ pounders has come out in the winter months. And then these fish are staged up out in the main lake. So with the technology, electronics, instead of using lead, now we're using divers. We've been able to locate them and catch them. Because it used to be 10 years ago, you had to wait till they went up the river to spawn. And then everybody was at the bank, elbow to elbow, casting for them in the dam.
Water.
When you say you're using a diver, what's a diver?
It's a disc with lead on it, like they pull in the Great Lakes.
Okay.
It's got the trip lever, and then they'll run a crankbait or whatever. We've introduced that the last probably 4 years because we used to use 2 and 3 pound cannonball leads.
And just run it down there. And
it was on the bottom, and whatever you hit. And then if you gave it any slack, that 3 pounds would pull out the hook. So now with the divers, we run line counters, and we can get it adjusted. So with these big fish in the wintertime, they'll sit out there in those deeper waters, and we can run mapping on them and locate them and run these divers at the right depth and catch them more consistent. But
Did
you'll
it-
still run through a school of 100 fish and not hit one. Then there's not even one on the graph, and you hit one. There's still a lot of luck to it.
Yeah.
Still fishing at the end of the day.
Right.
In that time of year, do they mainly just suspend? I mean, are they suspended up off the bottom and just sitting?
You'll have to get right on the edge of the river channel. They just stack right on the edge of the river channels. You may see one or two roaming around, but 95% of them is going to be on a river channel ledge.
Okay.
Just sitting still in the current, filtering the water.
Yep.
Just
And,
true.
and then once March hits, I usually say about spring break, mid-March, they start heading up the rivers, and that's when we turn it into a numbers game. The last couple of years have been a little slow. We haven't had that big rain or inflow or flood, but you get a flood, they're piling up in the rivers, and our record's 126 in an 8-hour trip.
Spoonbill?
How many people?
Yeah,
Holy.
3.
Could they,
60, 40, and a 10-year-old.
could
And
they even drive home after?
no, and I don't want to beat that record again because I got a white towel out, and I was waving it on the end of the rod at 5
Yeah,
o'clock.
for anybody listening that has never gone out and fished for spoonbill like this, you're
Or reeled
basically
in, yeah.
snagging them. You're not throwing a lure. So it's like reeling up a friggin', I don't know, refrigerator.
Well, your average fish is a male's going to be 40 to 50 pounds.
If you've ever hooked onto a 40 or 50 pound log and reeled it in, that's
yeah,
what it is.
pretty much. I mean, every now and then they'll, especially if you get it like in the tail, they might fight swimming away. But for the most part, it's just reeling up a dead weight
Yeah.
that doesn't want to come up.
A Volkswagen.
and then in
Jeez.
the springtime, though, you got to watch it because you'll get those smaller males and they know it's spawn time, and you hook one, it'll come out of the water.
Feisty.
And it'll get in that current and
Feisty.
rip line, and you better hang on.
Really? And when is that? In the spring?
Yep. That mid-March to the end of April. I'll go till the last week of April, and usually we're done switching gears to bow fishing.
What's your personal best on spoonbill?
126.
Lee, that's
Yeah.
a big fish, dude.
Yeah, and I've been doing this 33 years.
That's insane. I don't know what my biggest is. I think I've only caught that one day we caught a few, and none of them were huge. And still, if it was 60 pounds, it was.
Yeah, I think we had a couple in the mid-50s that
Man.
day.
I can't imagine 126 pound just.
Well, nobody had a
It's
problem
like reeling
reeling
up
them.
a dead body.
You're the only one that had a problem reeling them in.
Oh,
Well,
Just saying.
I have my strengths.
do you have better success on like a big spinning reel or like bait cast? Like what's your better gear on those big fish?
I helped Meat Hunter Rods design a 7.6. We call it the Big Game Pro. And I use those trolling, so I use a pin squall with a line counter because you got to know how much line's
So
going
you
out
know
on
exactly where
those
it's
divers
at.
to where you can set them. And that changed the game. So if those fish aren't sitting on the bottom, I know how much line to set out to nail them. Then when we're casting for them, we went to a big pin spinning reel with the 8-foot Meat Hunter rods. So you kind of got to have two different,
Depending on what they're doing that day.
couple different tactics because you can get up in a hole and there may be 20 or 30 of them, and you don't want to be deeper than about 30 foot of water jerking for them. I like less than 20 because you'll just wear yourself out.
Yeah.
And that's where electronic comes in because you're just not going to stand there at the boat and cast all day and wear your side out and your arms out and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So
you've got gear galore then if you're doing crappie, sand bass, catfish, spoonbill, bow fishing, we've been to your garage. You got stuff all over the place.
Yeah, during the winter months, it's a full canopy with the butane, propane heaters.
heated enclosure. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I counted for insurance the other day, and I have 137 fishing poles that I actually use. That's not the other ones in the back that are piled up that have retired or got dust on them.
130. How many can you reel in at once?
You one.
Yeah, at best, on a good day.
And then what about bow setups?
Bow setups? We got 10 bows, and we're shooting the Muzzy, the LVXs, and I've got a couple smaller bows, the PSE burner bows for kids, and that's the good thing about it. When you come out with us, we supply everything except the fishing license.
Now, did you come up with that format of the lights and everything on the Sea Arc boat? or do they make that for you now?
No, I had that custom built. That was
Gotcha.
my design.
Gotcha,
So
okay.
I know there's 4 or 5 more out there like it now.
Yeah.
Because my welder buddy told him what I wanted, and he designed it. And that deck's
Should have patented
actually
on that one. You
I
should.
should have.
Dang it.
But that deck is actually removable
Okay.
in just a
Dude,
few
it looks
hours.
like it's built on the boat.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah, you
Great
couldn't tell
job.
it's not part of it.
Yeah. But that's what I like too about that semi V hull. It's a 17-degree hull, so we can run across rough water. And even in a 24-foot boat, if we're in 1.5 feet of water, we're still floating.
Yeah.
With 6 guys in the coolers and boatload full of fish. So it's impressive, the ride difference. I don't know if I could go back to a true flat bottom.
I'd hate to. I mean, to be able to get in 1.5 feet of water in that boat with, we've done with 4 guys or better, and buckets full of fish, but then be able to, we get caught in a storm and run across a main lake and not have to worry about getting swamped and beat to death because the boat's made for running water like that. I mean, it is the best of both or all 3 worlds.
Yeah, I never would have dreamed we'd been able to get in that skinny of water in that boat.
Yeah.
But of course, mainly I've only bowfished out of your tracker,
Yeah.
and so
I
seeing
think his will
that-
drift in shallower water than mine.
Yeah, if I got a foot, we can go. And that's another reason on that 24-footer, I put a 200 on it, Suzuki,
Just to help balance it out.
for
Or-
weight-wise, because there was 800 pounds difference between a 250 and a 200.
And until you set your boat up and we started fishing it, I had never seen anybody else with power poles using them for bow fishing, especially with clients. It's good, but for us, we found out fishing tournaments and wanting to hit coves, run back up in there fast, come to a stop. You drop them while you're still moving in right before you get to the end, and it'll slingshot you backwards. I mean, we found the timing right to drop them.
Shoot all your
And
fish.
as soon as it starts pulling back, pick them up and spin around. But yeah, to not have to worry about just letting it hit the bank or having your trolling
that's
motor.
the only boat I've seen run that way.
It was
Everybody
funny
else just
because
runs
what was
without
it?
'em.
We've been
Yeah,
shooting the
it
Muzzy
was really cool.
6 years, and we pulled up there to the Muzzy, and they looked at us like, "What are those on that boat?"
Yeah.
They had no idea. They're like, "You guys bass fishermen?"
Yeah.
But nobody. We had to explain it to almost everybody.
Logistics.
Well, for
the-
here, I mean, yeah, because we beat the banks, shallow water out there in Kentucky and Alabama and stuff. They're fishing deep water, flood. They have grass flats. It was 20-some foot deep, and the grass was say it was 20 foot deep, and the grass was growing 19 foot up. So you've got a foot of water between the top and the grass starts. So all those big buffalo and stuff will be in that grass.
Sitting on
And
top
so
of
you're
it.
running, now they'll be in it. And so you're running a lot of times with a kicker motor or sometimes a fan boat, and just like the vibration, I guess, of the boat will push them up in front of you and then shoot them. But so they really don't have a whole lot of use for power poles like we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have any.
Gotcha.
I've never found a place in Oklahoma to fish like that.
And when we hit a bank, it's done.
Yeah.
You might check it in the morning if you're shooting a tournament, but once you run a bank, it's over. There, we were going back and forth over the same spots.
And they're just loaded in there.
And they just float up like a 55-gallon drum. Yeah, and you're going 5-6 mile an hour. Yeah.
and they're just all in the grass and
Yeah, they'll just float up. Well, we was at I believe it was a Muzzy one year, and these guys had a stereo rack on their boat. And we're like, man, what they got that for? Little do we know they were playing bass, and it was vibrating underneath the boat, and they were vibrating.
Kicking some Little Wayne through there and making
Exactly. And they were
Yeah.
getting those fish to come out of that grass and shooting them. And I was like,
I'll
we're
be
going to have to
dang.
write that one down in the books.
It's
Tricks of
those
the
guys
trade.
so the first tournament I ever fished was a Muzzy on Gunnersville, and that guy that I was sort of working with, this freelance camera guy, a real good friend of mine now, Nick, was running camera, and I was and he was fishing, and then these two brothers, Jake and Jaron Willman, and these two boys, they'd grown up. I don't know how old they were then, maybe 20s, early 20s. And they had a boat that was not much bigger than this table. The deck was made out of expanded steel, like mesh, and shop lights. And but man, they knew. They'd been on this lake. They didn't have any electronics.
So they whooped your butt.
I was fishing with them.
Oh, okay.
And they like, it was the weirdest thing. I'd never fished tournament before, and I'd only really got into bow fishing maybe a year or two prior to this. And so it was just so much knowledge. But on their home water, on these lakes there, they knew everything. And so when we got on the water, like I said, no electronics. He said, we're not in any hurry. They launch either, I think back then everybody was kind of launched at the same time and bumper cars out of the parking lot. But they knew they were like, no rush. We know where we're going. We'll put in and we'll start fishing right there. And there's a friggin' highway in this one little cove. And I was like, all right. So sure as crap, we get on the water and it wasn't even dark yet. And this little flat bottom, I don't know, maybe have been 18 foot with a generator that it was probably a 2,000 or 3,000 watt generator in this thing running these lights.
Loud.
And yeah, I'll be the first fish that came up. And so they had their big motor and then a kicker motor with a tiller handle up front, like a push pull.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, maybe a 6 horsepower on the back. I don't remember what it was, but so I thought we were running a big motor. We start fishing. I'm like, are we going to use this motor? He looks back like, dummy. Yeah, this is the motor, the kicker. And I was like, okay. And I mean, we're flying. I bet we're going 10 mile an hour. And sure enough, man, the first fish that gets up, I think I shot first and missed. And then I think Jaron shot and hit it. And this fish takes off. It was so cool because lit knocks in boat fishing was just sort of new. And so you see this lit knock go down under the water and just out.
Take off.
He's out swimming the boat. We got to fire up the big motor, catch it. It was like, I'm thinking, well, I feel like marlin fishing here. Like, we got to fire up the big motor and run this thing down.
Marlin.
Yeah, we get a couple more arrows in it. And it was like a 35-pound buff. And I was like, holy crap. Just absolutely. And it, of course, we've been cursed. The Muzzy has its own curse with storms, but every year we'd had some kind of issue. I think right after that, we had, I got to get Jake on here sometime to tell these stories. I think the throttle cable broke, and then we got it fixed, but it was getting late, so every place was closed. So we fixed it it was the one that had like a barrel on the end, and it went into something. So we got a lead weight and crimped it on there and made it work. And then we got it hooked up, and then we couldn't get it running. We're like, what in the crap? What's that? The one-way valve on the pump, what do you call that ball?
Like your pressure
Fuel
ball
line?
yeah.
On the fuel line was backwards.
Oh.
But it
had been working.
was fine. It had been working. Like how it had been working, I still don't know if one of them was screwing with me, but it was backwards. So we got it turned around, and then a storm hit. It was crazy. But then, fast forward, we lost Jaron 4 years ago, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. No, you came fishing. Why did you come? It was me, you, Nick, and Jaron.
No, that was the year Donovan stepped in.
No, the first year
the first
you came.
year. No, yeah, the first year I came.
It was me, you, Nick, and Jaron.
Right.
And we get on the water, talking about no electronics. We get on the water and, or was it, it doesn't matter, whoever was there. We were in Tommy's boat and we're scouting, and Jaren's up front, or Jake, and maybe they were both in the boat. We were scouting, and they were telling Tommy, just kind of stay on this line. There's no visible marks on the water. Nothing sticking out of the water. There's bank over here, and then way the crap over here. So Gunnersville is part of
The TVA.
the
Yeah.
river system, and I don't know where it stops and starts, but where we're fishing is a big, sort of like an oxbow or something, but it was huge. You couldn't swim across it hardly. And so he's telling Tommy, he's like, little off to the right, kind of stay on this line. And we're, pushing some fish up, and then we sort of stop seeing fish. And so like telling Tommy, just come back left just a little bit. And so he kind of steer it left, and then we start seeing fish again. And you know where I'm going with this, don't you?
I know exactly where
Tommy
you're
goes,
going.
hey, come back here. So this is, I don't know, the 4th or 5th year I'd been fishing with Jake and Jaren, and the first year Tommy was there. And so I go back there, and I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's got his big freaking depth finder screen on there, and he's like, look at our track. And I was like, yeah. And so he zooms in, and where they're keeping us, just with no landmarks, it was about a 2-foot depth difference where it came down and kind of leveled off and then dropped back down again. And
Little shelf.
you
that ran
couldn't
line.
tell on top of the water. And we're running this thing for miles.
Yeah, it was right on the edge of the river channel, what I would call a secondary shelf.
Yeah.
They weren't even fishing the river channel. They were on the secondary shelf of the river channel and was not off of it by a foot or two
And I don't know if
for miles.
we even asked him, and we probably did. It's like, hey, like, do you know the structure under there? And they're like, no. I just know if we stay on this line, this is where the fish are. This is where we shoot them. And it was like we'd fish all over the place. And I don't know that they were pretty excited looking at the electronics and stuff. But then when it came time to find fish, they'd give a crap if there was electronics on that boat or not. If it had gas and we had bows and arrows is all they cared about. Like, it was insane, the knowledge.
Well, when you guys do these tournaments, is it a numbers game? Is it a weight game?
It's
What do you?
both. So there's, each state has their own, well, most states, I guess, have their own terms. Oklahoma has the Oklahoma Bowfishers. I can't remember what it's called now. Mine went blank. But we've got a group, association, a society, or whatever. You can join. You pay your dues, and then you fish so many tournaments of theirs, and you get points, just like a bass
Yeah.
circuit, but it's just for Oklahoma. And then you have national tournaments, like Muzzy is the longest standing, and then Bass Pro has a tournament now, and then the which is the U.S. Open, and then you've got the Worlds.
You got the Cajun 8.
The Cajun 8. There's some bigger ones popping up, paying out good money now.
But are you fishing
Oklahoma
for
Fish
whoever
Stickers is what it's
shoots
called.
the most fish, or are you shooting who shoots?
The majority of your tournaments is going to be like your Big 20 or Big 15.
Okay.
A lot of them will have side pots or they'll have a bracket, say, most fish. But you will have guys that'll shoot that. Then they may turn in 800 to 1,000 fish. They may be shooting little weed gar, little carp, suckers, shad. But most of your guys are shooting that Big 15, Big 20.
Well, and they usually have big fish too out of every different species, don't they? Sometimes.
Yeah, because we've won that a lot. We've the U.S. Open, we've won big fish quite a bit. And no, I will not say what lake we were on when we shot 73-pounder and won big fish. So
yeah, it depends on the tournament, but yeah, there'll be, and there are some tournaments that are just numbers, but that they may have a side pot. The bigger national tournaments will be set up for big, probably like grass carp, biggest drum, usually not gar, drum buff, and maybe if we're in like Kentucky, they'll have biggest Asian or something like that. But they'll have those side pots that you can buy into if you want to, and then overall weight for your biggest 20. Most of the big tournament, I think all the national tournaments are big 20s.
Yeah, they're pretty much
Except
big
the
20s.
Cajun. And then
Are they mainly like you're trying to shoot big grass carp? Is that the bigger fish that get weighed, or?
It just depends on where you're at. Like if you can get in Kentucky, if you're on big heads, I mean, they're 80, 90 pounds.
Well, they just had a huge one at Grand Lake too, didn't they?
Yeah, 118 pounds.
Yeah, monster.
Yeah, I've seen them on live scope. I guess I have to start catching one of them for bait or something. But
Nasty.
we don't have Asian carp or silvers now, as they're calling them, but we do have the big heads. And you would see, I've only seen 5 of them out bow fishing and got an arrow in one, and it was so mean it broke the arrow. But now with the electronics, they're finding out we got more of them. Well, I was visiting with the state biologist, and they pulled the DNA, and they come from Nebraska. So they don't know if they've been, filtered down through the systems and ended up. But we do not have Asian carp.
So the Asians are the one that jump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your big heads, you got to shoot those at complete silence, which me and Tim are not very good at being quiet ever.
There's a reason why we've never shot big heads.
Yes.
It's not like
Y'all got that little Wayne bumping.
Yeah, that's right.
for the most part, and it's funny. Deer get educated by presence. Different places. You'll see if you got eastern central Kansas. If you slow down next to a field full of deer in your vehicle, they'll run like
They go.
They know.
yeah, all the poaching. And then you got some places like southern central Kansas where there's just so much ag that you can drive through the field and they'll step out of the way of your vehicle.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you get out and walk 2 feet from your vehicle, then they run.
Yeah.
Fish are somewhat getting educated to the presence of boats and what the lights and stuff to some extent.
There's a lot more people doing it now, too.
Yeah, sure. And I don't know that, that's something that they really pass on. I don't like to think fish are that smart. They might be, but they'll, at any rate, it's not something that you have to be quiet and still, which is one of the reasons I fell in love with it, because if you know me very long, I'm not good at sitting still or being quiet.
Well, you are capable of being quiet. I don't know if you're capable of being still for very long.
Yeah.
Next time you're traveling, just turn the radio down 30 seconds. He's crying and turning it up. Just
Freaks
so it's
him out,
playing.
man.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot
Yeah.
better at that.
I'm kind of the same way, though. I like some music playing or
but
somebody
it's
talking.
so bow fishing is like
You want to torture
It
Tim?
is.
Leave him alone with his own thoughts.
we don't
He usually won't let
we
you.
don't like that. You don't. I mean, it's awesome. You jam out. You can pile a boat with friends.
Well, you got
Decent
generator
one,
running, so I mean, you got noise.
Yeah, and radios. We got speakers.
Well, if the
It's-
fish are getting educated, I mean, it must be a little at a time because we saw a ton of fish. We weren't
Yeah.
quiet.
I think
I
it's
watched him shoot all of them, and
I think it's
it
more
was
about the
entertaining.
lights than anything else. But it's 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 just something that anybody can do.
It's fun for all.
Yeah, you don't I don't know.
good-
Probably
good-
all states you have to have a fishing license.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would think so.
But there's no limit in Oklahoma anyway. They've been talking about setting limits on certain types of fish, but
There
I
are
don't
some-
want to go down that rabbit
Right.
hole.
Aren't there some places you can't shoot, though? Like I've seen some, like in
there's definitely
certain
pieces of
sections
water.
of the river, or
Yeah.
There's fish that you can't shoot.
any game fish. Yeah.
Yeah. So check your regs. It varies by state, but any game fish, for the most part, you can't shoot. These are invasive fish that are not good for the lake or water that they're in. But we try to be just, ethical in the way of you get around campsites because we're fishing in the middle of the night for the most
Right.
part with generators and bright lights. So we try to steer clear of campsites. If someone's house is close to the water, you don't just want to be pissing people off and just making a bad name
Right.
for bow fishing. And so there are some lakes that will post things, but on tournaments they'll set up red zones so that they don't want you to fish in those areas or else you'll be disqualified. so that they'll allow these tournaments to continue to come back.
Different
We're not-
neighborhoods and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not rolling up in marinas and
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the main thing before you go, that's a good thing about it is you can buy a bow from the pawn shop and throw a reel on it and make you a bow fishing rig.
Oh.
But know your state laws and regs before you just go out shooting
Most
anything.
definitely.
Because there's stuff I've seen they shoot in Louisiana. I was like, that's cool, but we can't do it in Oklahoma.
Yep.
So, but it's good for everybody. I mean, you can walk the banks and do it. I know ponds that have big grass carp in it that are overran, or your local waters, or down below the dams on tailwaters, and there's no age limit to it. It's just fun for everybody.
It's good off-season bows, keeping your skill up on your bow too, because you're shooting multiple times.
I don't know about your skill, but it'll keep your muscles in shape for dang sure.
yeah, it didn't enhance my marksmanship, let's say, but I was in shape
Did
by
it?
the end of it.
So it's funny, and you've said this guiding, find out that the people that don't bow hunt like with a sight and are really technically dialed in for pins and stuff. People who don't bow hunt at all do better starting out at bow fishing because it's instinctive. It's you see it and you pull back and shoot. For some reason, people that are used to aiming with a pin or whatever have a hard time just instinctively hitting the fish, except for Calahan. Calahan can put down his compound hunting bow and pick up, I think, any stick that's got a string tied tight to it and fling an arrow and hit a fish.
Well, that was just, I had a good night.
Bull crap.
Had a good
That's not the first
Sandbagging.
time I've been on the boat with you, bow fishing. And Tommy and I have talked about, I don't know why we haven't invited him to tournaments.
Well, that's what's going to happen. You're going to invite me, and I'm not going to hit a fish. And I'm like, yep, here we go. Here we go.
There's
Yeah, but the capability is there. They are not going to invite me, I can assure you, because on a good night, I'm not
I
very
wouldn't
good.
say we never invite you.
You've got something going on for you. You're fun to be around. You got a great personality, and you don't weigh
He
much.
fits in small places.
Yes.
Okay.
If we need to dig something out from under the deck up front,
yeah.
you're in.
Mhm.
But it
I
is.
feel like
It's-
I'd get stuffed in the barrel.
Shane, get out of there.
But it's it's anybody can do it. Clients that you take out from little kids, as long as they can draw a bow back. I mean, my kids started when it would barely fling the arrow off of the bow. I mean, it was hardly really any draw weight to it, and shooting things, and I think the biggest question is, how do you aim? How do you aim?
Low.
Ashley, who's sitting back here making sure we're staying on track, man, she had a hell of a time. She went, was the first trip, I think, was with you. We filmed that episode a few years ago with
The girls.
my girls and your girl, and it took all day. And then over the last few years, taking her out, and she just was struggling and not being able to figure out. And I don't know, we only know what we know. Our analogies are only what we've experienced. And I kept trying to tell her, it's like throwing a ball. You just throw it enough times for enough time. And
if you throw it that way, it's going to land right there.
yeah, I can see some. I mean, we're ball players, so anybody who's ever been a football or baseball player, you just know that you can look at somebody and tell how far away they are. You know how hard you need to throw it and how high you need to throw it to hit them right in the chest. You can lob it, and I can throw it softer and throw it really high, and it'll come down right on top of their head. Or you can throw it as hard as you can, and you know just how to aim. It's just a feeling. And there are a lot of guys who use, I don't know, the point of their arrow to aim or something, but I've never been able to do that. Even shooting, trying to get into recurve now, I don't use anything. I just see it and just shoot. And a couple weeks ago, took her out, and it was like all of a sudden that night, she hit a fish, and she was like, "Oh, I said, what'd you do different? She's like, nothing. I didn't look at anything except the fish. And I was like, that's what I've been telling you for years.
Yeah, and it's also weird when you do figure it out. It's like, you know, before you shoot if you're going to hit him. Like when it clicks, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
It is a funny way that it works out.
So when you being whether you want to chalk it up to beginner's luck or not, when you're shooting,
I've been shooting a recurve bow since I could walk. So that's
well, that probably helps.
Now we're knowing the truth.
Sandbagger.
We're getting somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you, when you shoot, are you looking at anything in particular as an aiming device, or are you just seeing the fish and drawing back and letting her rip? Do you anchor at a certain point?
I think I don't anchor anything. Every shot's different because it's usually a different angle and stuff like that on the boat. But to me, what feels right is a certain peripheral where that bow's at and where I'm shooting, depth of water and stuff. There's just a peripheral where it feels right. And it's just like, I don't know, everything's got to be right where it needs to be. And then when you let go, it just feels good. I think it's peripheral of seeing where that bow's lined up and everything. I've never could get
Almost
lining,
like an index.
Kind of like that, yeah. I could never get to, like you said, trying to line up an arrow. It just never made sense to me that way. And if you think about it too hard, you just get off and you never find a pattern. But whenever I can just draw back and it feels like, okay, I know where that's going to go, let go. It's repetition. I mean, it's just like you said, throwing a ball or anything like that. Once you know where that thing's going to go.
I mean, there's.
Well, Tommy's shooting them one-handed, running a trolling motor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, and shoots one, and I ain't got my bow drawn back yet. And then like the big, giant grass carp that you shot.
Cool. That was cool.
I saw the fish the same time you did. And then Brain said, okay, get bow, and then pull, and the fish was already running off with your arrow in it.
Zen.
It just didn't register. You were just like,
it is.
You had 6 arrows in your hand.
Well, you say that comes, everything's falling into place what you guys are saying, because my shot is not at the front of the boat or on the right side. My shot is fish swimming away from me because I'm always running the trolling motor and I like that fish away. If you put a fish right out in front of me or right below the boat, I'm going to miss it. But that fish moving, I've got it.
You know exactly what that feel is.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's different styles, different probably how you practice. Some of a couple of the guys that are by hands down the best shots I've ever seen. One was Jaron, and his brother Jake is not too far off, but he'll even admit you go $1 a fish and you'll go broke when you shoot against Jaron. And he would draw the same almost every single time.
Repetition.
Whether it was, and Jake's the same way. He'll come to a full draw if the fish is in 2 inches of water and it's a 4-inch long fish. He'll shoot it at full draw, and then if it's a giant fish, he'll shoot it full draw. So he misses, and his arrow buries in the dirt. I should probably do that, and I would most likely be a better shot. And then Donovan, who cooked the fish, y'all have met him. He also had a guide service in Florida, and he anchors when he draws his bow, but he hunts with the same. I don't think it's the exact same bow, but he hunts with an Oneida, and hunts traditional, no sight or anything. So when he bow fishes, he anchors just like he's hunting.
Yeah, like he's going to shoot a whitetail.
It's so weird, and he takes a minute. He very rarely snap shoots. He anchors and makes sure it's right. But I've been on the boat with him over and over, and it's something's wrong if he's missing multiple fish. It's the most frustrating for me to fish with someone like him and Calahan sometimes. That just like, but for me, if I kind of like you, the fish swimming away, if I draw back on a fish and I have to wait very long for a stick or something, a lot of times I'll look away and then look back, and as soon as I see it, I'll shoot. Like, it has to be truly just draw back and shoot instinctive, because as soon as I start to think about it too much, man, I get in my own head and I'm off. If it's quiet, like when we're fishing tournaments, a lot of times we don't have the radio going, and it gets hard. If we go too long without shooting and it's quiet, Tommy and I, a lot of times we'll just start goofing off. We'll start dancing or singing songs, so that it's almost like when you see a fish, it catches you off guard, and I'm a better shot.
Snapshot type
Yeah.
of deal.
Well, and you talk about it, Blaine, he shoots with a release.
Yeah.
And he's a snapshot, but he has to have a release.
And again,
I've never seen anybody do that.
I've fished with it like that before.
Hell of a shot.
I don't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hate it because your fingers don't get wore out as quick.
Well, they don't if you use super glue either.
Well,
That's
true.
right.
That's true.
That's right. That is a
Trick of
trick.
the trade.
Yeah, because I would wear my fingers down from shooting so much and missing that I finally started super gluing my fingertips.
together, you like super glue them together, like a mitt.
You got
Kind of.
you got to do it like, well, are you shooting one above, three below?
Well, so that's the
Well,
thing
like
too.
Tim, he shoots 3 below and I shoot 1 above, 2 below.
Yeah, so I shoot 3 fingers under
right.
because when I started, the bow I had was a short bow.
I don't
an
know
old
how I do
PSE.
it.
Well, you're not a tall guy.
That's true. But because it was such a short axle to axle, when you draw back with one of your fingers over the arrow, it would the
Pinch it.
angle of the line would pinch your
Knock.
finger between the knock and the line.
Yeah.
And time after time, yeah, it was wearing my finger down. It was splitting it open. I'd be taping it up all the time. So at some point, somebody recommended just shoot 3 under.
Yeah.
And you have to adjust where your
Anchor point. Where
yeah,
your aim point is.
well, where you put your knock for
Yeah.
your arrow. My knock, I shoot a little bit knock higher than if I shoot my bow with 1 over 2 under, it shoots different. I don't know. It does something to the line. There's probably a smart person that could tell you what happens there. But it changes the way it shoots.
Well, like back in the old days, I was taught to shoot 2 under, 1 above, or 3 under, 1 above, whatever you would do, because that's how you kept your arrow where it needed to be. Now we've got those little guides that sit there, so now you can do 3 under
and just push it up against it.
and push it up against it, and it stays right there,
Yeah.
and you're there where you need to be every time.
So when I shoot a recurve or a longbow or whatever, just out of habit, I shoot 3 under. And I think that, I haven't paid attention to much people, but I feel like most people looked at me weird when I was shooting that way. When we made those bows and they were setting it up to, and I was like, I'll shoot 3 fingers under. And they were all like, what
You
happened?
Still,
Did you lose a finger?
You still get that look.
I do. And
It's
they still
weird.
ask what happened. Because
I may just have to stick with the little ballista crossbow.
That was awesome.
Those, if we get that figured out, and the setup and exactly how it needs to work, those things are killer.
I think it's the same. I think with a little bit of, a little more practice, taking them out and shooting them. We didn't have time to really dial in that red dot, which, I guess if you get that dialed in, they say it's just.
Well, for the people that missed that has a crossbow that's like miniature with a red dot sight on it and a
It'll
bow
fold
fishing
up and fit in a
setup.
backpack.
It's the
Yeah.
ballista bat,
Mini bat. There's the bat and the reverse.
bat. Yeah.
And one of them shoots like 300 feet a second. One of them shoots like 400 feet a second.
We took them out and tried it out, and if you can get it figured out, we weren't in the shape to figure it out because I was shooting too good to really spend time with it. But I think it would be really cool, especially for people that's impaired and they want to do it, or kids to kind of get on. You get a fish on doing anything, you get hooked to it. So I mean, I think that would be a really good way to get
there's
that
shoot,
crowd.
Draw.
Pull it
Yeah.
back like a slingshot. I mean,
I like the safety mechanisms because I've had people before, hey, can I bring crossbow? No, we got enough to worry about with that. I felt safe with it being on the boat. So
Yeah,
like
it's got that
you're
little
talking-
handle underneath there. I would like to see a shield. That way you can't get your thumb up there.
and they actually, the ones we got that came with the bows are not the ones
Gotcha. Gotcha. Made
that
up
most of
for
the people are using. It is a bigger shield and a different handle.
Cool.
So we need to get those. But if you can get that thing figured out.
And, you know, talking about the laser and the lights, we've tried anything and everything you could think of. And the light, for me, throws it off. You're trying to keep it on the fish. There's too much going on. So then we go right back to instinct shooting.
Yeah. Well, I was taught, like shooting a longbow, if you hold it back more than 3 to 5 seconds, you're not going to have a good shot. You're going to miss. So it's just that quick drawback, and you're instinctive where it's going to be, and you release.
Well, it was, we took those red dots off because, we hadn't practiced with them or anything like that. And it was just as easy going instinctive with the little crossbow without the red dot on. But if you got that down and there was no doubt, you're seeing the dot on the belly of the fish or whatever it is that you've got it sighted in for, Katie, bar the door. I'm going to give you a run for your money.
Okay. All right.
It's changed.
I'll be waiting.
That, not holding, being a little more instinctive with your shot. I sort of tried to take that into shooting a compound and hunting. I think, I found out, I felt like after a while of bow fishing and then going back and trying to push that in, I feel like I was holding a lot longer than I needed to before I took my shot. And so tried to take that mentality into once you get on target, and back in the day, you had told me that when your pin hits when you're looking at your pin and the first time it is on target is the most accurate it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
And so trying to
target panic.
Yeah.
I've got target panic like so bad, and I'm trying to
But
fix
even if
that.
you don't get the panic, the there it is, punch it type of mentality, it's just like, you're holding that weight out there, and, our eye wants to grab the pin, and it's doing it. Well, we all think, boy, that he really holds that pin. Nobody does. They just learn to let it float and paint within the lines, so to speak.
Well, my lines are way out there.
And, that's why, you hold it long enough. If I have you hold something out, you're going to start falling. And it's like, there's a timer in there, just like when we're shooting instinctive on these fish. Like you were saying, if you see a fish, you'll look away and then, okay, now shoot. There's a timing to it. And, even in compound whitetail hunting or target shooting or whatever, you got a shot timer internally, and that's, you ought to try to follow that because, this is all about recreating the same thing over and over and over. And if you can do it, you can be pinpoint, and you can shoot a group because you're doing the same things over and over. And that timing's the same way.
So definitely don't get your, Debbie Downer if you go out and you're not shooting very good.
I would never go back if that was the case.
I do remember one of the first times taking you, we went to, was it Uchi?
Yeah.
And back up in the creek, and it's super clear. The fish can't go very far because my boat's skinny, so we get back up in there, and it was kind of turned, so they didn't want to come past us, and the current was coming at us, so the fish were just kind of staying up, and you shot at fish for half an hour or better, just sitting there,
giving it his all.
Words that would
don't mix.
It was so funny.
Well, and that's what I tell people when they're coming out on a trip. Don't worry about how many's in the barrel, how much fun you have trying.
Yeah.
Because the more you come back and do it, the better you're going to get. Now, I've had people that's been with me 4 or 5 trips now. We might shoot 30, 40, 50 fish a night. They started out putting 1 or 2 fish in. Well, I had this gentleman call who wanted to book a bow fishing trip. He was a state champion archery, runner up in a couple other states. And I said, this isn't going to go well. Well, what do you mean? I said, you'll just have to listen and take your time. Don't get discouraged on your first trip. Well, he ended up booking 11 trips with me that summer. And by the end of the summer, he was putting fish in the barrel. But he was used to standing, breathing, focusing, had his rhythm, take your time, and shoot.
And this is completely the opposite of that.
No, it's just spraying and praying arrows.
You had to pound it into my head early in the evening, just shoot.
Yep.
Because
you gotta let it go. If you don't have an arrow out in the water, you're not going to hit it.
Yeah. And I was trying to make that perfect shot instead of just making a shot. And the more shots you make, the more you understand. You get that feel.
Maybe
But
that's all I'm doing, just shooting more.
No, you didn't shoot more than I did. And, the night that I went with Tim, the only fish I put
No,
up,
because every time he shot, he's reeling in a fish and putting in the bucket while we're shooting 4 or 5 more times, missing 4 or 5 more times.
and the night I went with Tim, we shot some good grass carp that night. And the only fish I put in the barrel were off of his arrows. He's like, grab him. I mean, I shoot 4 or 5 times and he'd let me.
Use it as a spear.
The water was gin clear. The fish weren't super spooky. And he'd let me shoot, reel back in, shoot again, reel back in, shoot again. And then he'd just shoot him. And I just like,
just pin it to the bank.
mean,
And
I
be like,
was-
all right, now hit him.
yeah, I was saying some stuff to make a prostitute blush. And
It was so funny. And there aren't too many bad habits that it'll cause for transitioning into the fall. Like I said, it's good for your muscles for drawing your bow, keep your back muscles. One year we fished I don't know how many tournaments, a ton of local tournaments, and then we traveled 2 or 3 of the big tournaments. And by the time that fall came around, I guess by the time August came around, and I really started having time to pick up my hunting bow, I would pick my bow up, and before I'd go to, or about the time I'd go to hook my release on, I was trying to push the button on the reel. My fingers kept flicking out like they were trying to push the button to let the line out. And I mean, that lasted, I think there were times in the stand where we'd get up there and I'd just, put the arrow on and get ready, and I'd find myself trying to hit the button. But talk about one of the most frustrating things in the boat to do is to draw back on a fish and not have your button pushed. I don't know. Is there anything that you have to pound into a client's head more than that? Push the button.
Aim low and push the button. Remember we took the girls out?
Yeah.
And they all 3 arrows hit the side of the boat because none of them had their buttons pushed, and we said, push your button.
I just sit there and push mine.
I do
I'm
too.
just constant.
So that's where
Constant.
that's why when it came time to when I was
I'll probably push
picked
it
up
100 times,
oh.
shoot one dang fish.
I was flicking at the air. But yeah, it's and shooting low is something that people have a hard time understanding. The deeper the fish, the lower you have to aim because the refraction of the water. It's like pointed out to Ashley, like, remember when you were a kid sitting in the pool and you just got your legs hanging in, you're sitting on the side of the pool with your legs in, and you're like, look, my leg's broken.
Yeah, it looks weird.
It looks weird.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same way with a fish. He is not where he appears to be to us outside the water. He is actually lower than he appears to our vision.
Mm-hmm.
So when, I've never taken the time, and maybe I should in an episode, because I was showing Ashley again on some videos, filming some of the episodes. You can see I would go frame for frame, and when the arrow enters the water,
You can see it split.
yeah, once it's in the water, you can see it lower. And when it hits the water, it looks like frame for frame, when it starts to hit the water, you think there's no way that's going to hit the fish, because it looks like it's going to shoot, way under. And then as you follow the arrow, it hits the fish. It's the weirdest thing. So you've got to, if you're truly aiming with some sort of aim point, then I think for me that would cause problems to try to aim.
Well, are you guys looking, like, for example, like when we were shooting, I would say maybe 3 foot of water was average, what we were shooting fish in, 3 or less. Are you aiming at the fish's belly? Are you aiming completely below the fish?
I think I honestly probably shoot more towards the belly than anything. I mean, you're always there. Most of the time, some fish do surface, but most of the time they're under the water. So I'm usually aiming below every time. Just put it below it.
Yeah, I was just like, are you aiming just below him, or are you aiming a foot below?
It depends on.
I know depth makes a difference.
Yeah, because if they're in a.
Definitely.
But when you see a fish, where do your eyes go? Do they go to just below him, or
I go to the head because I'm going to shoot him in the head every time. But some guys go to the belly.
I don't know.
I'm going to gut shoot that thing, man, because I've shot some really big fish in the head and just watch it bounce off. I'm like, okay, all right. But if it, that was more or less head on, or it was a deeper fish, or Are you a head shooter?
I mean, I don't look unless I find myself consistently missing, and talking to Tommy and asking him, where am I missing?
Where is
if
it
I'm
going?
consistently shooting low or consistently shooting high, at that point, when I draw back, I will focus in on. If I was shooting high, I'll start to focus in below the fish. But for the most part, now I just look at the fish, and the
'Cause
only
you-
thing that I'm really
it all
gauging in my mind
processes.
is how deep I think he is, and then everything just
Adjusts.
instinct
Yeah.
takes over. But if, like I said, if I'm having problems, or for people who are, newer, getting they're finding their shot, I would tell them, when you spot the fish, start looking just like below them, because it's a lot easier to tell somebody start shooting a little bit higher.
Shoot in the belly.
98% of the people shoot
in the
high.
belly.
Yep. That's what I tell them too. You're going to naturally shoot high. Aim low. If you think you're aiming low, aim lower. It's easier to bring that arrow up because it's just natural.
For me, like when I see them, it's hard for me to get myself to aim off of the fish.
I could see where that would be an
Because
issue.
I'm like, well,
That doesn't make sense.
I'm not looking at him.
Yeah.
But I was shooting high. I'm a rookie, and to aim, I had to finally, when I started hitting fish, I was literally aiming off of the fish below him with my vision, and that was making the adjustment.
Another thing I tell people is relax, because I've done it. I get stiff, or I'm missing fish, and I'm like, oh, why can't I hit
Or you
one?
just start slinging.
And I'm just standing there.
Tense.
Finally, once I relax, bend my knees a little bit, put my butt out, just kind of chill.
fart a time or two.
3 times.
Okay.
Three
and
times.
just send the arrow, and you'll start hitting fish. If you're up there tense, nothing works right. It just, you just relax and have fun, and you will notice the difference of fish you're hitting.
It's easy to get in your head when you're just like you miss a couple deer bow hunting, and you talk about getting in your own
20
head.
yards might as well be 100 at times.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. You just like I said, have fun.
And that's the thing too, is like we've talked before and on the show about how it helps the environment. We need to continue to teach this to the next generation, because we're getting overwhelmed with invasive fish. And my example of it is what's going to eat a 5-foot gar?
Yeah.
What's going to control this population? And I know they're in
I will
every
now.
lake in Oklahoma. Yeah.
How was that?
It's amazing.
Really?
Ask Shane.
It was awesome.
You make some garfish patties, or
He
what are you
made
doing?
garballs, and I'd heard of them fried before, but all he did was, I guess you'd say, poach them.
You ever made those?
I've
We'll
had,
have to.
He
I've
took-
had alligator gar, but I
He
haven't
took the
had
back strap, cut them out,
Awesome.
put some stuff in a blender, like some ginger and a little bit of garlic and just some seasoning and some cilantro. And then he
My mouth's watering.
Dude,
took
just-
these chunks of, because it's just the back strap.
Yeah.
He just cut it into chunks,
Yeah.
threw it in a blender.
It looks like good meat.
And it just made a paste. And he took, the like onion soup.
Hey,
in
we cut up
water.
some onions and put them in the water, and then
Yeah.
use the he bought
Bouillon from a ramen noodle.
ramen noodles,
Okay.
shrimp flavor.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he poured that in water, and he took this paste and just made the balls and dropped them in the water. And when they started floating, they were done. And
So
scooped them
no
out.
grease.
No grease.
Man,
Healthy.
that
Absolutely.
that
And
sounds great.
I could have made
Amazing.
myself sick on them. I mean, I was just like,
I've never heard of them cooked that way. Everything I've heard, is I've seen them done and backstrap them, and
Yeah.
But I've also heard you can't eat the eggs.
Eggs.
yeah.
That was something he
There's
was
some kind of
had to be
poison or make you sick or something.
something. He didn't know for sure, and haven't looked it up yet. But it was one
Well,
of
come
those
on,
where it's like,
Professor Tim.
don't want to screw it up. I didn't have time.
What about spoonbill? Have you eaten spoonbill?
Oh yeah.
Is it good, or is it just like rubbery? Or
I tell people it's like processing a deer. There's a way to do it right,
Right.
and there's a way that you won't ever eat one again, because they don't have bones; they're all cartilage, and the blood and oil goes through their pores. So I fillet them out on the half sides and do all the bloody work, and then tell everybody take them home and soak them for 12 to 24 hours. It'll firm that meat up.
Soak them in just water?
Just
Salt water?
heavy salt water. And then you'll trim up the red meat and skin off of them. And then they'll have like a little belly lining. Just trim up what's not white meat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will soak them again for 12 hours in salt water. And then I'll freeze them. If I'm going to cook it fresh, I may put it in 7-Up or salt water, or I've had some people put it in buttermilk.
7-Up?
Mm-hmm. And it draws that oil out of that meat. And then it is a white steak-like texture. But if you go home, you take it, clean it up, rinse it off, and throw it in there like a crappie fillet, you won't eat it again.
Really?
What about the eggs? Because, that's the big draw and why we have to regulate them, the way we do is they are.
The caviar.
I mean, the only finer caviar out there is sturgeon.
Mm-hmm.
So
They're I don't know.
They're
Can we
cousin.
talk about that?
Cousin, brother.
You can keep the eggs of the fish you keep.
Right.
Yeah, you
In
have to-
Oklahoma.
you have to tag one,
let's
right?
talk about, we're in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So you can keep, as a resident, you can keep your eggs, but you can only have 3 pounds of processed. You cannot cross state lines with them, or it's a felony.
What is considered processed? Just
That is
cleaned
when
out
you
of the fish? Or?
break them loose from the membrane. When you actually have the eggs, they're attached to a membrane. And when the state would process them through their cleaning station, they would take them over like a plastic grate, and they would break it loose from the membrane so they'd all be individual, rinse them, put this special recipe on them, Oklahoma caviar, and it's sent out the door.
The Russians screwed that up for us.
Black market.
Yep.
yeah.
And
big
then
time.
you think a lot of it, you think
Huge.
caviar in Russia. Well, it wasn't. It was all going to Japan. And I've tried it right out of the fish, and it would have to be the best Ritz cracker and shot of vodka you've ever had because it's just a salty fish taste.
There was a big, I mean, it was wasn't that long ago, right? 10, 15 years ago that there was a huge ring of, it was paddlefish eggs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're still current. There was a big bust here a couple of years ago right there on Grand Lake, and I know they caught some over in Missouri, and it's still the Russian mob and taking caviar.
They can
It's
have it.
still here.
I mean, you think about you're fishing on possibly the world's largest population of caviar, and it's supposedly the best. I mean, this side of sturgeon, which how many places can you go catch sturgeon?
I don't know, but
Very few.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've tried caviar once, and then rich folks can have it. Well, you liked it? Is that what you just said? You liked it?
No, I said I don't like it. It
Oh.
would have to be the best vodka and crackers ever. 'cause
I don't-
That's
he
what they do. They
He drank
have
the
it on a
vodka, ate
cracker.
the crackers, and threw the eggs back in the water.
I'd have to try it. I mean, I'm a big sushi fan, and I like roe.
Well, that's
so
what I
don't
was
know
kind of
if-
thinking about.
yeah,
I was like,
I don't know if I would like it or not.
I don't know. I think we were on a cruise or something when I tried it. So honestly, who knows what the hell I ate? But that and
Might have been gar eggs.
escargot, 2 different nights. Both of them were terrible. Escargot was the worst thing I've ever tried to eat.
what is that again?
It's just
Snail.
snail.
Oh yeah, I had that in
Like,
France, dude. And it was awesome.
Oh,
It was
See,
awesome.
so yeah, you and I might like.
Well, let's go catch
what did
a
it taste
paddlefish.
like? What did
Huh?
escargot taste like?
It was just like a garlicky, buttery, kind of like a cooked oyster taste.
Well, do you like raw oysters?
They're all right. I mean,
love 'em,
no
dude.
no
Oh,
one likes it.
Oh, I love them.
It's not
Let's
you
go
can,
fishing.
They're not good at chewing up, right? You're not going to get an oyster and
I would chew it
Yeah,
up.
I
Tim,
chewed up.
they've always
Wilson-
been just chew. And that's
Well,
the escargot was like.
I mean, most people, you just kind of swallow
Swallow
it,
it.
but I mean, I'll chew on them.
So it depends on the-
I'll chew on that.
Yeah.
Depends on what they
booger.
were cooked
Yeah,
with.
that's my wife is like, oh,
Well,
it's
Tim,
like a slimy
we'll
booger.
let them go eat that and snails, and we'll go have a steak.
The escargot.
I'll eat that too.
It tasted like someone put a garlic clove in a snail shell. And when I ate it, all I could taste was like this overwhelming. It was like they tried to mask everything else with garlic flavor. Again, it's not like I was somewhere that was like France. I was on a cruise ship. So these things were probably bought off eBay the month before and frozen
Uh-huh.
until they served them at dinner that
Yeah.
night. And
I usually don't eat those kind of things.
Yeah, you were having the
unless it's like
Frank's
an
Country
authentic
Inn
place.
version.
and to be honest, back then on a cruise ship, there's no telling. I was probably had so much to drink,
Yeah, probably.
they were probably laughing and feeding me
Yeah,
rubber bouncy
it probably
balls.
wasn't
it's-
anything you actually.
It's super cool though to
It's like they're
find.
chewy. You remember them being real chewy?
Like, man, that was pizza crust. He's an idiot.
Well, it's super cool to find that like gar. I've always heard, not always, but here recently, I think the first time I saw it was on Swamp People when those two older guys were making gar fish patties, and I was like, you can eat a gar because you kill a gar, it
Absolutely.
just smells the worst, and you're like, I don't want to eat that.
It is the whitest, cleanest meat you've seen, like a crappie fillet.
It is,
It is the oddest.
but it's
thing.
not textured like a crappie.
It's kind of like, is it like gator?
Yeah,
like gator.
ish. But
Maybe
then
like mixed with
he
the shrimp.
blended it up.
I don't know. Yeah, because we
But
well, I
like
say
the
we, he
backstrap,
cubed
when
it.
you felt it, it had that kind of, gator frog kind of texture to it.
Well, that's super cool that, you can add that into bow fishing if you were like, yeah, it's good, and you actually like cooked it for them.
And we ate drum. There's not a bone in a drum, evidently.
Huh?
Huh?
Yeah, there is.
We filleted them out. There wasn't
In
a
the-
single
in the-
bone
Oh, in the
fillets.
meat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like
I was
the
like-
carp, you got to sit there and
Well,
pick
it's
out all
kind of like a
those.
trout and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the drum, fillet it like normal, and there's not a single bone in it.
Because
I
the
had a-
drum isn't a carp. It's a different.
It's a drum.
It's a drum.
And you think about it, I mean, a red fish is a drum. You got the black drum. When people go to the bay and fish, they're all drum.
That's right.
So they're
Yeah.
probably great eating.
Yeah.
I had
I
a
mean, ours
customer
was.
that was at a wild game dinner and said buffalo was amazing, and it wasn't canned or pressure. They
No,
actually
they-
cleaned it
It's
and cooked it,
super white.
and
I-
said buffalo was
I
amazing.
saw, I guess it was Josh Bomar. He
Yeah.
was eating them the other day, like a big one. He filleted it, and I was like, dude, that's a lot of meat.
Tim Wells, same thing. Yeah, well, they're cutting off of a 35-pound
Yeah. It's a lot of meat, man.
buff. Ours were not quite
What were
that
those
big.
bones called we were having to pick out of there?
I was calling them feather bones just because
Yeah.
they're real wispy. But
And then one of them's got a pencil bone, like the gar. Was it the gar? No, it wasn't the gar. One of them's got like a long, looks like a,
common carp.
yeah. And I mean, you stab somebody with it. And then the buff, they have a feather bone in it. I mean, it almost comes
think
out like a comb.
The
that's-
carp had the most little bitty bones. You had to really.
Well, it's like a
It was
pike.
like
Like
shorter.
in Canada, when they clean pike, they had to cut like the center piece out, and they were like, "There's just so many bones in there," and he just knew where to cut on it. And
Yeah.
just cut it right out.
Well, maybe that's what we all need to do is go bow fishing. I'll pack a big cooler with ice, and we'll get one of each species and try it.
I'm game. That sounds awesome, dude.
That's essentially.
I mean,
Sounds
Donovan-
like a great idea.
Well, if you think about it, they're taking Asian carp, or the silvers, and they're trying to contain them. Well, they were shipping them out for bait. Well, they said there's a restaurant in New York City that it's like $1,500 a plate.
what?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I filleted them even catfishing, and they are
What?
all white meat.
What could we charge if we went and got some caviar and some $1,500?
I bet
Some
you,
carp.
I bet you shad on a cracker is not too bad.
Hey, I did have a customer say that he wanted some bait after a trip, and I was like, yeah, so I put it in a baggie. And his wife was
Silver carp?
Huh?
What'd you put in the
No,
baggie?
shad.
Oh,
Shad.
oh.
And his wife was Oriental, and he come home from
Stir
work,
fry.
and she was cooking the shad. They had to spend 3 days in the hotel while they got the house aired out from the professional
Yeah,
cleaners.
I was down at Eufaula Dam one time fishing. I used to go there freaking every weekend. And no joke, they brought this, I guess you call it a walk down there by the water, and fire it up and get a throw net, throw it out there, catch a shad, and just put it in this walk, and they're just sitting there cooking it and eating
The
it.
shad?
The shad, yes.
Just frying them right
Just
out of
frying
the
'em,
water and
I was
into the
just
oil.
Like,
So
no
that-
way.
That smelly, slimy
I
crap
don't-
you get
I
on you
don't
from
know,
those
man.
shad.
I don't, yeah.
So a silver or an Asian,
Mhm.
they're like overgrown shad.
Yeah.
They stink. They
Oh, really?
it's like
as
a
soon as they
gar.
touch you, you get
That
this.
gar's got that slime on it too. That's why I was like, I'll never eat one of those.
Not
Yeah, but not
bad.
like that. I mean, you handle a gar. It's not like handling big old freaking gizzard.
Silvers
shad.
have so much blood in them.
Yeah.
They're just like, you could fill up a gallon jar full of blood, but then that meat is just different.
They're fun to shoot though.
Hmm.
Well,
Unless they
Interesting.
fly through the window and hit you in your.
they were fun for about
Take you out.
the
I
first
wanna-
night we shot.
I want to go shoot them with a shotgun.
Of course you do, you redneck.
Well,
I do too.
I do
I do
too.
too. I want to
Okay.
do it really
it's like
bad.
bow fishing and skeet all wrapped in one.
Yeah. I was watching, I think it was Chuck Belmore doing it and reading some of the comments. I don't know exactly where he was. It was private water. It's legal on private water, but I don't know, according to that, and I didn't finish reading it all, but a lot of public water, it's not.
I could see where that'd get a little
I
hairy.
mean, you got to shoot steel.
You want to shoot steel. You
Absolutely.
want
Yeah.
to screw up the
Absolutely.
water.
but it's like, if I can shoot at a duck from a boat, why couldn't I shoot at a silver from a boat?
you could.
Good.
You do a lot of duck hunting running down the lake?
You can probably shoot
they'll
skeet. You
hold
can,
still low
you can shoot
enough.
skeet off a boat too if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You're just thinking of a way to finally put a fish in the boat.
Hey, man. You
No,
got to
that
do
was-
what
Yeah,
you
How do you think about that?
If I had an arrow that would scatter like buckshot, I'd be good.
It's fun. We gotta plan a trip for all of us and go down to. I don't know if they've come back to the extent that they were when
It's
we
like
were there.
St. Louis. Is that where there's a bunch of them?
We were on.
Kentucky Lake.
Was it Kentucky Lake?
Yeah, we were
And
down on the
below the dam.
Cumberland River, wasn't it?
It was crazy. We
Let's-
drift up. We sort of figured this out as we went. We would drift. We'd get momentum going up to these lines of bushes. And we figured out if we'd go up quiet, and as soon as we get there, Tommy would just hit the trolling motor, and they'd go to jumping, just the vibration. And they land in the boat. So we were trying to shoot them out of the air, having fun one night instead of scouting. And we're like, man, this is awesome. Until you don't want to shoot them or have them jumping out of the water. And then all of a sudden, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Running down the lake. I mean, it was so right after
That's
that tournament,
scary.
they
That's
brought
scary.
in commercial boats to get. Yeah, it was. We got hit several times, because it's. I don't know during the day if it was the same. We were sleeping during the day, fishing at night, but yeah, at night. I mean, your power poles are how far are they up off the back of your boat
Probably 8 foot
from say the water
from
level?
the water. Yeah, they're 10 foot.
So from the water, they're 8 foot up off the water or higher.
no, they're about 8
About
foot.
8 foot. Yeah.
So 8
Yeah.
foot, and it's a 24-foot boat. Is that about 24, 26? We keep
24.
going over this.
It's a 24
24 foot
yacht.
boat.
I'll write it down for you.
And we're not going 70 miles an hour. Because it's dark at night. We're on at this point, we're on Kentucky Lake, and these silvers will jump in front of the boat. They'll clear the power poles if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, they'll split the gap in the windshield
and
and hit you
Tim.
right in the nuts. And that's not cool because it happened.
Speaking for
So
experience.
after Tim got hit in the
So
nuts,
he's over there just freaking rolling, never lets off the throttle, just absolutely cracking up, laughing. I'm trying to find this fish and throw him out, pissed off. About the time I get my breath back, he's like, "You all right?"
right upside the head.
I mean, right in his friggin' face. And I was like,
if you haven't
Slows the boat down.
had a 15-pound fish slap you upside the head, you'll do the
Well, I
dishes
mean, you see
next
guys
time.
wearing helmets.
Yeah, well, and we're driving probably 30, 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, if it
So
don't
it's-
break your neck.
Yeah, it got to be dangerous. And
And
there
you-
were,
And you feel bad because it's a big recreational body of water. You think about having your kids out there tubing.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
just enjoying a jet ski ride. I mean,
It's like hogs. They're fun until there's too many of them tearing up your place.
yeah.
You know.
That's just with any invasive species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was that year, maybe in the next year, they had a bounty after the tournament, or there were people there that would buy your fish because there was a bounty on the lake. I don't remember who it was paying so much per tail of an Asian. He was taking the tail. And then they had these big giant trawlers come in with these nets. If I remember right, the nets went out the side, and as they would troll, they had these electrical probes under the water that would make them jump into the nets, and they cleared out a bunch of it. But one of the craziest things, we were thinking it was the vibration of the boat motor or whatever that flips them out and makes them jump. Well, I guess they're really susceptible to electricity. And so we had a storm come through, and like for the next couple of days, we were talking to locals. We're like, hey, we haven't seen any. Like, it's awesome. They're not jumping. We go into coves, whatever. We're not seeing them. And it was an old timer was telling us that the lightning, right? It was the lightning that shut them down.
Yeah, because we seen them like in the coves, and then the storm come through, and for 2 days you would see them on the graph in 30, 40 foot of water. And then they were talking about it at all the ports where they were going in and out of. They started putting flashers, and they would put an electrical current across it and strobe lights. So whenever they were putting in barges or boat traffic back and forth, they were
to keep them from coming through.
It like shuts them down. They'll go deep, and they won't jump. Like we had 2 or 3, or I guess the rest of the trip we saw very few.
Well, they're probably trying to get away from that like static.
Yeah,
feel,
the storm came through quick, but it shut them down for days. Like something with the lightning, or if there's even lightning around. One guy was saying if you're getting an electrical storm around, they'll.
Well, I know, bass. If the topwater bites on, if lightning starts happening, you can pretty much just stop throwing topwater. They're not coming up.
Does it?
Is it more of a pressure deal, or is it? That's what all the old people say.
I don't think it's a pressure deal because, they love pressure change and low pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Like fish usually, the bite's on.
Yeah.
But lightning starts and you're throwing a topwater, you're done.
Does it affect spoonbill? Because they're super sensitive to electrical pulses and stuff, right?
Yeah, but I've never been out there and tried to look at them after a storm. I mean, they're usually 30, 40 foot of water anyway. So maybe they're deep enough it doesn't really bother them.
Did they ever figure out like how the Asian carp got into our waters?
The rumor I heard was...
Like, you mean in Oklahoma specifically?
Just no, in the United States.
Somebody brought them over here.
Probably a gift.
In Arkansas to put them in a sewer plant. And when the Mississippi flooded, they got in there and went wild. That's the story I heard.
And then
Which makes sense because, they do that same thing with tilapia. Use them to clean, and keep algae down.
Right.
And
put them in ponds and different stuff like that.
And a lot of wastewater treatment plants use them.
That's a real shitty
maybe
job.
Maybe they thought that Asian carp would be the same way.
Huh. And they just didn't know it was going to be that invasive.
Yeah. The thing about the tilapia is they can't survive in our temps. As soon as the water hits 50 degrees, they're done. But the Asians can.
Like dead done?
Yeah, like dead done. But they're prolific spawners. Like they'll spawn 7-8 times in a year when you get tilapia. But as soon as that water temp drops below 20, and they're so dense, because we bought them for the pond at the fire department because we're trying to keep that pond clean. Because
when it gets above 50, they're intolerant of hot water or warm?
No, the hotter the water, the better.
Oh, okay.
If it drops below 50, because they're a tropical fish, they just sink to the bottom. They don't even float up. The biologist when I was talking to him before we bought them, he was like, you won't even really know they're gone. They're so dense. They just sink to the bottom.
So they die.
Yep.
Dead beings die.
But the Asians, they can withstand
the temps.
So they literally take it over. They're invasive, and the tilapia is great for it because they can't.
And I don't know, did they say what they were doing with all those fish when they were cleaning them out of the lake? Did they eat silvers?
They were using them for fertilizer, is what one of the locals said, and the other one said they were grinding it up and sending it to the East Coast for like crab pots. They were using it for.
I also heard like some hog farmers were using it to feed also.
Yeah. So, sort of wrapping this back around to bow fishing, people have a lot of questions. There was a big stigma for the longest time, really probably until, 15 years ago. Bow fishing was a very, I don't want to say hillbilly, but, it was
pretty redneck.
It was
pretty redneck.
Yeah.
And it was
inhumane redneck slaying of party guys on a boat with lights.
No, they weren't using lights in boats back then. They were, for the most part, so way back they weren't. But as it got to be bow fishing and boats and lights and stuff, it was just, I don't know, it was a different sort of a quieter society. It was just kept under wraps because it just had this bad reputation with bass fishermen, thinking that bow fishermen were just out shooting every dang fish they came across. And, maybe way back in the day it was, but guys were bow fishing back then for food. I mean, when it started, they were going out and shooting fish because it was easier. If they didn't want to bite a hook, you force feed them with an arrow. And so it was what they were catching fish for food.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it got to be a sport thing. And then, those that didn't really understand just the ignorance behind it, bass fishermen threw fits. They were trying to get it banned from lakes. I don't.
Well, it's also disturbing like their fishing areas and stuff like that. So
yes and no.
To a point.
What they didn't really understand though is that
that's what the ones that couldn't catch any fish. That's the
Yeah.
thing they would use.
Yeah, they would blame it on
Yeah.
us bow fishermen.
Yeah.
But a lot of these fish are bottom feeders. They'll destroy bass beds. They're an invasive species, and they'll come in and just decimate and really put a hurting on a bass population. And any, I don't know if perch were having a hard time, but so by going in and taking care of thinning out the population and pulling these fish back out of the water, they were come to find out, the bassman's like, oh, it's helping. Kentucky Lake was a big one. At the beginning, when the Muzzy was holding the Muzzy Classic on Kentucky Lake, because it's like, Shane, I'm guessing you can contest, it's a big bass fishing lake.
Big time.
It was a destination lake for
Oh, yeah.
sport bass fishing. And
It's a ledge fishing lake. Those
I mean-
fish set up in schools of hundreds of fish. And, BASS, they kind of shine the light on that. You can't catch them as well on the ledges as what you used to. But,
yeah.
Guys go catch 100 fish a day.
And you go in at night with lights on and see the bass, and it's just absolutely incredible, the number of bass and the size of some of these bass. And it was because the bow fishermen were coming in and really taking care of a lot of the fish that were hurting the bass beds. And
How long would it take a buff to vacuum up a whole spawn full of eggs? Not very long.
Well, there'd be 3 or 4 of them or 5 of them, and they would go back and forth, kind of like holding a piece of candy out to get that bass off that bed, and they would go in there and clean it up. The bass would go to the left, they'd go back to the right and clean them up.
Hunting in little wolf packs.
Hunting in
Yeah.
wolf packs.
Them sons of bitches.
but it's like anything else.
Makes me want to shoot more of them.
I think bow fishermen, if you look at the evolution as someone gets into it and then grows and grows, it's like anything else. You want to get better and better at, you sort of have bigger goals. So you're not shooting as certain fish or small fish. You're wanting to get bigger, older fish sometimes. And we, for the most part, there's bad apples, right, in every group, but we take a lot of pride in not shooting game fish, calling out bass or crappie or whatever it is, catfish. Kind of like if you're out pheasant hunting and a hen gets up and everybody's yelling hen, so no one
Yeah,
shoots. Or
absolutely.
if you've been duck hunting a long time, all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'm only shooting greenheads.
Yeah.
And then or if by God you ever get good enough, it's like I ain't shooting if they don't have jewelry on it, right? So we're not quite there. I haven't shot any tagged fish, but we take a lot of pride in not shooting the wrong fish. And to be 100% honest, the first or second, it might have been the first year that I shot on Kentucky Lake with those guys. Twice I shot bass scouting. I think it was the first year I was there, and the fish, it was under a grass mat or something. And the freaking bass are so big, like the tail fin looked. I thought it was not a bass. And after the second one, I stopped shooting for the rest of the night. Like it was just until I felt like I was confident that I could identify the fish I was wanting to shoot, I wasn't going to pick my bow up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I mean, you got a split second to make that decision, so it does happen, but not very often.
yeah. And
I mean,
this was, I mean, we were scouting, so it's
well,
not
we
like I
shot
was.
for what 6 hours the other night. We never shot a game fish or
Yeah.
anything like that. We saw them, but that never happened.
Yeah, no,
Well-
I was newer to the sport. I was definitely new to that lake and that many big bass. Because at night there with lights on, you could literally pull up.
They're sleeping.
If you wanted to
Yeah.
fish for big bass at night on Kentucky Lake, throw some lights on and go out there, and
And throw something in front of it.
you might have to snag them. Is snagging bass legal?
I
No.
think
No,
it's
okay,
not.
so-
Can't do that either.
Yeah.
Okay, so so if you could get a night bite on fish, man, you could find them.
You can put a minute in front of them that'll eat it. I
It was
guarantee you that.
insane, but so much fun.
Well, I
And-
know, some of the most ethical outdoorsmen are bow hunters to begin with. I mean, those guys put in the effort, they put in the time, and then, it's no different than these guys that are going out and bow fishing. I mean, it's like nobody wants to be that guy that's out there, because how are you going to brag on that anyway? But like you said, we go out of our way to recognize the species that we're shooting. Somebody's calling it out, and again, once the shock wears off and everybody starts to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is helpful. Like I would have had no idea as a bass fisherman,
Yeah.
until Tommy told me that these things are in here wiping out bass beds.
Yeah.
So I would like to propose then that. What'd you say the most ethical hunters are bow hunters?
I believe so.
I would like to propose then that the most ethical fishermen are bow fishermen.
I like that.
Maybe
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes
Stand to
sense.
reason.
Well, and it comes back to how you're introduced to the sport. You can be introduced by somebody that doesn't appreciate those things and
That's true.
they don't do it the right way, and then that's how you're going to be. But if you introduce it the right way and educate people on it, you're going to have a very good reproduction rate of that ethical
And
Well, I
again,
mean,
the bad apple goes everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
nobody out there, no discipline is perfect.
That's why we have laws.
Yeah.
and you'll see it too. You'll see guides. I see it all the time. They'll put some lights on their boat and they run the banks. They're a guide. Them fish have patterns. And we've seen it fishing tournaments. You're on a body of water. We go a week at a time to figure them patterns. And I've had the old timers tell me about moon phases. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. But we watched one lake where about 10 o'clock, all these big buffs would come on a flat. They would go back down. About 2 o'clock, the big grass carp and commons would come up. About 4 o'clock, they'd go down, and the big buffs would come back up right before sunrise. So these fish have feeding patterns like any other fish.
Yeah.
You'll get lucky and run into them. But you
And
have
I'm
to
sure
pattern them.
certain parts of the lake at certain times of the year. Because, like as soon as we pulled up, if we talked about going up the river, you're like, well, we can shoot numbers up there, but the big fish are, not in there right now.
That's why I'm the professional.
Exactly.
That's right.
But, and then you get on you want to really get into numbers, find out where your local area is in the spawn. Because you get them gar and carp up there during spawn, they when we were younger, we didn't pay attention to anything but the spawn. And they don't pay attention. You can shoot in piles of gar and they'll run off the bank a little bit and right back up there.
Yeah.
So that was another thing we was talking about. The hogs with disposal of fish and everything. Different states have different laws on how to dispose of them. And different lakes have it. So you need to make sure you're disposing of them properly. Do not go out there and empty your barrel and let your fish float up on the shore, or dump your barrel at the boat ramp. So everybody's got to smell it and back over it.
Yep.
That is probably the biggest complaint. Because on Grand Lake, it is a giant recreational lake.
Yeah.
Well, somebody will get lazy and shoot 10 or 15 of them and just dump them out, and they float across where the wind's blowing.
And get on a bank, and then somebody complains, and then there we go. There's some more regulations we've got to deal with.
Exactly.
Yep.
Or, well, I don't want to, dispose of them properly. I'm just going to dump them right here at the boat ramp and take a picture and not pick them up.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
find out there. I think it was Kentucky that it's not. Was that to say where at the time it wasn't against the law to dump them?
Yeah, remember we put in below the dam and was trying to drive over them
Yeah,
and get
people
out.
just
And
throwing them on the rocks, and definitely be respectful. it's amazing the lack of consideration that some of these people have. But yeah, at tournaments, they'll take them to either a pig farm or turn them into fertilizer places that turn them into fertilizer. I know turtle farms, evidently there was some crash in the turtle market, but turtle farms were big, and so they were sending them to turtle farms for food.
Yeah, when you told me that first night, I was like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah,
You follow the turtle market?
it's a long story.
Turtle Man is his favorite.
The guy I bought my bow from back in the day was I guess you'd call it a turtle farmer.
I almost got into turtle farming.
For like pet
there was
turtles.
No.
Yeah.
Like what you buy at a pet store.
No, for eating.
No, I'm talking about the one he
His
bought.
was for pets.
Oh, I was getting into the meat sales of it.
Like a
turtle
soft
meat.
shell.
Uh-huh.
Really?
No, like all of them, dude. It's a big market for like turtle meat. Not to get off topic, but you can get into turtle farming. They do like turtle traps and stuff, and you can send them overseas, and it's a big market.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, my mom, not to get off topic either, but my mom had an Indian friend, and she made a turtle, and it was outstanding. It was phenomenal. Had
Well,
like
I've heard of
7
people
different kinds of
eat
meat.
soft shell, but
Mom tried to make one, and the dogs wouldn't even eat it. So,
Well, to try to get back on topic a little bit, what's the best way if somebody's going to go out and bow fish to dispose of their fish?
like on Grand Lake, we're able to dispose them back in the water. So I will gut them, and I will take them out to the deepest part, like 50, 60 foot of water. I'll leave my lights on, and I'll sink them. But I'll make sure they are gutted, hit the air bladder and everything.
Okay.
Or you can take them and bury them, and they got to be 6 foot deep.
Whoa, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yes. But if I have one that I didn't hit well, I'll get my gaff out, I'll re-gaff it, bring it up there and cut it. So, I mean, we took
Make
the
sure
time.
they sink.
We took the time to shoot them, take the time to make sure they sink.
Yeah.
Because I live on the lake. I got a dock. I don't want dead fish floating up there where my kids are swimming.
Yeah.
You know, like we said, be respectful, you know.
Yep. They'll
you could probably fertilize a garden pretty well with them.
there
You know,
is
I've had people come down to the ramp and, hey, can I get a couple of those fish? And they'll put them in their gardens and till them up.
Yep.
I mean, is there anything started yet for? I know it's hard because fish spoil so quickly, but like, do enough people eat them where you could take them to like a shelter or something like that?
There is no commercial fishing in Oklahoma.
and not every lake.
Well, like deer,
You
you can
can-
take deer, can't you?
Yeah, but it's a donation.
Well,
Hunters
can't you
to the
don-
hungry has their own. I mean, the state has a
Well,
program.
why doesn't like if gar is that good? Why and some of that stuff is so? There's a lot of meat that could be put on people's
Maybe-
table.
Maybe you got $1 million idea.
Just shared it with the world.
Could be something.
But like, yeah, not every lake you can do that in. So check.
But they sit in a bucket for a long time, and you're not gonna really like.
Well, you could throw them on ice, but
You could, but that's if you're gonna shoot fish, we throw them in a bucket and they sit there for hours, and you're not gonna really want to mess with that fish unless you shoot one that you want to eat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not
So,
going to eat it. But I mean, you know, take it home, double bag them, and
Yeah.
throw them in a dumpster. I mean,
Yeah.
don't throw it back in the water if it's not legal. You know, don't gut them and sink them. But by all means, don't just throw them up against the bank. Don't just let them float. Last thing people want to see is a bunch of dead fish and smell dead fish floating around. It's a quick way to
Spoil
Piss
everything.
off
to lose our
all your
privilege.
neighbors.
yeah.
Yep.
the bowfish.
But you know,
It's like,
Like
if
he
you
was
left,
saying-
if you're a deer hunter, right, and all your buddies are
it's a
shooting
wanton
deer,
waste. Yeah.
and then gutting their deer,
At a public
cutting off
access.
what they want, and then just leaving it right there at the trailhead or something, and everybody who comes in, or you're hunting by, the
Gotta do it
forest
to
or
smell
something, the
everything. Yeah.
wilderness,
Any
and
kind
you're
of access. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing. It's just respect of others and respect of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Do something somewhat productive. If you gut it and sink it, you're feeding something down there.
Yeah. It's just like, when you got a cleaning station on a dock or something like that in our lakes at our state, you could dispose of the carcass, and it's as simple as that. If you gut them, puncture that bladder, they'll
Yep.
just sink down. Turtles will eat them. Catfish will eat them.
Absolutely.
Well, like Tommy said, just check your regulations and make sure you're doing it correctly so that you don't spoil
Yeah.
the fun for everybody else.
And the best way to do that is check lake by lake, not necessarily by state.
Exactly. Because some lakes you can't even, bow fish. Some of them have regulations, So.
Yep.
Well, if you're have any questions on this or new to it, whether you're new to it, you want to find out more about it, or you've been bow fishing your whole life and looking for a new state to go try, don't want to haul your boat, look up Tommy, give him a call. No Wake Guide Service. Now's the time. Pitch and before you do, one of the things that, as we're talking about all this, that there's a couple years that I came out and joined you on some guidance, some trips and stuff, and it was neat to see the interest that the clients had as you're passing all this information along. Like a lot of the stuff that we've sat here and talked about, the different types of fish, instead of just telling them, no, you can't shoot that fish, or just instead of just saying, don't shoot that fish. Like you do a really good job of explaining things so that they would understand why they couldn't do things, and seeing the interest that these, especially the newcomers to the sport, that really just soaked up a lot of the knowledge, taking the time to answer all their questions. I just thought it was just did you a lot of good in your outfit, and it shows because you've won several awards now, best of the best on the lake, and I don't know the name of the awards, but
Best of the best. That's what it's called.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Literally best of the best.
Well, and that's one thing about it. Whether we're bow fishing or fishing, I take pride in, as I explain it, I know we're hired to put fish in the boat, but it's what knowledge are we sharing? What new interest are we getting? Whether you've done hunting before, never bow fished, or you've caught everything but never a paddle fish, or maybe you catch fish all the time. It's helping me expand that knowledge to them. And then if you get a kid out there and you get him off that video game or out in the outdoors for the first time, you may have changed their life. And I've got several stories I could go on like that. But just a real quick one, I had a family from Oklahoma City, and they come out there. The kids, after we caught their fish, played on the bank for an hour. They'd never really seen nothing but concrete. They were out there super excited with all the, trees and water. And
Throw a rock in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was their highlight. So I just take a lot of pride in it. I've had people that never picked up a fishing reel, and I've had people that are advanced anglers. And, the friendships you make, look at our friendship and all of ours, we've made that through bow fishing and being on the water. And, it's making memories. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. And I've had some clients that was their last fishing trip, and I've had some that book out a year in advance. Every time they come down, they're like, all right, we want these days again.
So if somebody's looking to make a memory, where all can they find you?
You can look up No Wake Guide Service. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, or you can send an email to No Wake Grand Lake or No Wake Guide Service.
I think we've got them on our outfitters page, don't we? Yeah.
And
So
my
we got 'em on
wife,
the website.
Barb, does all our booking. So if you call 918-314-3923, she will be glad to answer questions and available dates. And we run 2 boats, so we fish 7 days a week.
So how many can you take out on your bow fishing?
I always say 4 is comfortable. 3, we take 2. 5's kind of pushing it. You have to rotate in and out, but 4 is a very good, comfortable trip.
And then as far as spoonbill and rod and reel fishing,
Rod and reel fishing, the big boat, we can accommodate 5, 6. So that's kind of a good number. And if you got a big group, we can split up on both boats. So, and if you got a big group that wants to go bow fishing or a big corporation, we got plenty of other guys that can help. So that I trust that are professional guides.
awesome.
All right.
All right, Tommy, appreciate you coming in.
Well, guys, I'm glad you let me come in
fun.
here.
Appreciate your friendship.
Yep.
And appreciate the use of the boat all these years, traveling and shooting tournaments.
I'm ready to go get a cooler and try these different species now.
We'll
I'm
do
down.
it.
I'm down.
You won't be disappointed. I
No.
couldn't even believe.
I hope you
How good
cook
they are.
better than you shoot.
Let's hope so.
Get inside, outdoors, hunting big game. I come alive before opening day. It's a twisted addiction that calls my name.
Keep up with IOTV on social media for all their latest news, tips, and giveaways.